welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it. Ann Fisher is the host and executive producer of All Sides with Ann Fisher, a public affairs talk show covering all sides of issues and events shaping life in Central Ohio. The show airs weekdays from 10 a.m. to noon on WOSU Radio 89.7 NPR News FM. Ann became a talk show host in 2009 after nearly 30 years as a reporter, editorial writer, editor, and columnist in the newspaper business, where she was with the Grand Rapids Press, the Blade in Toledo, and then the Columbus Dispatch. She is a graduate of Michigan State University with a bachelor's degree in journalism.
It's so exciting to have you on our podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I've been really excited about having you on it. I've been waiting. So I just want to kind of dive in. I want people to get to know who you are and how you got here in the journey, and then talk about even more details. So during your time at the newspaper, but in the newspaper business, what was your favorite beat and why?
Wow. Well, so it spans about 30 years and a little over 30 years. And I think my most important beat, I did it for about 10 years, was cover the state government and politics. I was in the Columbus bureau for the Toledo Blade. And it was, I guess I look back on it as my favorite beat because it really set the table for everything I did for the next 20 years. After that, I did a year in Appalachia working. That's when I first moved over to the Columbus Dispatch after the Toledo Blade from the State House, this was quite a leap from the State House to covering Appalachia for a year. But it was so interesting to see how state government and politics play out kind of in the hinterlands, in real time. So you can get sort of blinded by the ivory towers of the State House, so to speak. And it's all the big shots are there and all the big stuff is happening there. But how it plays out in the real world was very interesting. So Appalachia was a great year I just couldn't handle the hours were extreme, like 12-hour days were typical. But I did enjoy seeing how public affairs and politics unfold in real time. And I couldn't have done that if I hadn't done the 10 years at the State House, nor would I have had the acumen, I think, to do a good, Metro column like I did for 3.5 years. And then what I'm doing now, which is a lot of public affairs discussion.
Was there something then that kind of really sparked that passion to make you kind of want to say, you know what, this is what I want to do?
You mean public affairs and state government? Yeah. Well, I grew up in a really political family and I'm pretty politically savvy. Mm-hmm. It's just something I grew up with. But on the same token, I always said I will never cover politics because I knew too much about it. And then when I was at the Toledo Blade, I was a feature reporter, which felt really safe and warm and cozy and fuzzy. And then the publisher came to me and said, would you consider moving to Columbus for our State House bureau? And immediately, it was really weird because I always said I would never do it. But immediately I felt this, oh yeah, I can do that. But I first told him, I don't even know who the Secretary of State is. I don't know who anybody is because I'd only lived in Ohio for a couple of years. And he said, well, that's stuff you can learn. Mm-hmm. And it's the other stuff that you bring to the table, the X factor, I guess, is what we call it now, that he thought, made me a good candidate for the job. But it was something that as soon as it was presented to me, I said, oh yeah, I really ought to do that, even though it's something I tried to avoid.
So how did that transition to you landing the talk show?
When I was a State House reporter, I was often on Fred Anderle's show, my predecessor's show. I wouldn't say often, but maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And along with maybe Bill Cohen, who was a long time Ohio Public Radio State House reporter. and a few other people. And we have sort of these little roundtables, maybe once a quarter. And I think that put me on somebody's radar. And then when I became a columnist years later for the Dispatch, Mike Thompson, the news and public affairs content director for WOSU, had me immediately. I think I was on his second show of Columbus on the Record. And it kind of coincided when I first got the column. So again, I was on the radar, and it was, and my, I think he might've brought me on no matter what, because I was a columnist. But I also, he knew about my background, 10 years in public affairs, it's covering state government and politics. So he knew I could probably hold my own. And I did. And it's just, we're the state capital. I mean, Columbus is the state capital. We really need a good, strong public affairs talk show. Which our audience is very sophisticated, a lot of former state employees, a lot of current state employees, people in politics listen to it, and that kind of a thing. And you really need to know what you're talking about if you're going to go there. You don't have to have a talk show that's about politics and public affairs. And of course, mine often isn't. Maybe it's gardening or the stars at night or whatnot. But if you're going to go there, it helps to know what you're doing, and when you're talking about that. So sometimes I feel like I'm doing the same show over for the last 30 years because the same issues are, at the State House, but it's definitely helped me, given me a lot more confidence and curiosity and authority, institutional knowledge, that kind of a thing.
So what do you think the biggest issues facing Columbus today?
Well, it's going to be growth, no question about that. And housing is which is what everybody seemed to be talking about these days, and for good reason, because there's a shortage of housing and the cost of housing has gone up. And how we're going to house lower income, lower middle income, and poor people in this city is going to be a huge challenge going forward. That, along with the growth and just the infrastructure and how they're going to manage that growth, is going to be probably the biggest issue, because obviously we're going to be rolling in it because we have these huge investments in Central Ohio now. So everything's good on that score, but there's still a lot to worry about as far as growth and, the things that make Columbus so great and so manageable and easy to navigate could be upended in the next, 10 to 15 years.
I find it interesting that with all the big projects that are coming in town and people are struggling with the hiring aspect, is that going to pull a lot of the talent out of the small to medium sized businesses, and to be able to support building all these projects and these big complexes?
Well, I think that it's going to be bringing people in from the outside. I think in order to, construction workers, electricians, plumbers, all of those kind of people are going to be sitting pretty for a very, very long time.
Yes.
Because, with the Intel investment and the Googles and the Amazons of the world out there and their investments in Central Ohio, people are going to be moving out there. We're going to need more housing. It's going to be more built maybe out on the east side of the region, but so I think they'll be fine. They're already being pulled from smaller projects. I mean, anybody trying to get a contractor nowadays, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at them. It's hard. And I think, that's going to be something that they need to work on as far as the skilled trades go. They need to be moving more people into the system with more apprenticeships, all of that things, diversifying their apprenticeship programs, more gender and racially. So that's going to be interesting to see. And I think they'll step up to it. As far as all the other jobs, I mean, there's just going to be thousands of people coming in who have never lived here before. That's where we were already going to have huge population growth by 2050, 2035, 2050. So this is just going to be a very big challenge. And again, I don't think it's going to be taken away from. We're going to be adding to. The pie's going to get bigger.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear, right? I mean,
that's what I think.
I just hear with us doing HR, and in addition to marketing, we just hear some clients that are a little afraid right now. And I understand, because it's so hard to get people in the door to stay.
But it may bring so many people in that that there's more to in a way to choose from.
Yeah.
And as people cycle through careers and want to do this and that and different things, right now it's just threadbare, the workforce, when it comes to tech and middle management and that kind of a thing. So maybe it, like I say, maybe the pie gets bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. So then, being in the news business, what's the biggest challenges you've seen in your career in regards to the news business?
Well, I think one of the saddest parts of all of the contraction is the loss of talent.
Mhm.
Now we have newsrooms that are unrecognizable from even 10 years ago. Say, you could just take the Dispatch, as far as who's in there and what. And, they're all good people and they're working their butts off. I don't ever doubt that for a moment. But a lot of them are a lot younger. You don't have the institutional memory, the institutional knowledge. You don't have, soon we'll not have long-term State House reporters on hand. Now, I think the Dispatch has done a great job of maintaining its State House reporting staff. That's part of this, the Gannett, Ohio team. But, it's just new people shuffling in all the time. And when I started at the State House back in 1989, I was walking on the shoulders of giants who were still there, right? I mean, I had people guiding my way, just by the fact that's just the way the State House press corps worked. It just was very collegial, except when it became competitive, right?
Yeah, right.
But so I'm not worried about, again, people not wanting to get into the business, but I'm worried about a lot of turnover right now, so that in 10 years, we're not going to have a lot of the wisdom of the ages anymore, that it's just been moved out prematurely. A lot of people have gotten out of the business prematurely.
Mhm.
I'd say Holly Zachariah, a great reporter. I hired her back when I was state editor at the Dispatch. She's leaving. This week is her last week at the Dispatch. She's going to the Attorney General's office. That's a huge loss. She has another good 10 years in her.
Mhm.
And, but it's the pressure and the stressors of the job. It's just not worth it, to people by a certain point.
So then, throughout the years, sometimes you have mentors as you go along. Who was your favorite mentor, and what was the best advice they ever gave you?
I think the best mentor I ever had was the first real editor I ever had at the Grand Rapids Press. And she was a features editor. And of course, now her name is escaping me, but her first name's Sue. It'll come to me. And she really helped me understand my writing better and helped me just kind of get into the DNA of writing a little bit more, and was very good about working with me, because at that time I was just a contract worker. So I got a great start with her, and she really invested a lot of time in me and working with me on my writing, kind of getting me out of that really super awkward age of writing where, every word is precious and all that kind of stuff. Very patient, and really great about brainstorming for show, I would say show ideas, but for story ideas and that kind of a thing.
Right, understood. So, what do you think would most surprise people about you?
People know by now that I have a lot of different interests. And I have a lot of, I'm just interested in a lot of things. A lot of people maybe before I took on this particular job, might have thought that I was just pretty much public affairs and that's all I really cared about, which of course I do. But I also love gardening and I love birds, and I just have a lot of different, I like talking about a lot of different things. So I don't know if there's much that would surprise anybody about me anymore that they don't already know. I didn't get married till 35. I didn't have my kids till I was 38. I got very much started very late in all of that. I didn't really start my career at post college until I was I think I was 29 when I first got my first quote unquote real job at the Toledo Blade, which was is later. But when I graduated in 1982, there was a really bad recession going on for about 2 years. And that was probably one of the first big contractions of the journalism business and of the newspaper business. And I was, bound and determined that I was going to go into newspapers. But didn't have a clue about how to even navigate that. Not untypically in college, they don't really prepare you to apply for jobs or anything like that. And back then, which is a kind of a beef of mine, but back then, you didn't even internships weren't as normal as they are now. They were expensive. At Michigan State, where I went, you couldn't get paid in order to get credit for it. And I couldn't afford to take off the time and not get paid from the rest of my curriculum. So I was like, there was no way I was going to be able to do an internship. It was for the rich kids. So, that a lot of that stuff has changed now. And the schools of journalism applaud you if you can get a paid internship. Yeah. But things have changed. It's just, was just a whole different time back then.
Understood. So what are the most popular topics on your show?
Well, that's an interesting question without a clear answer. I mean, it depends on who's listening. The Reporters Roundtable at 10 a.m. on Mondays is by far the most clearly, I guess, appointment listening. The most people, they make plans to listen at that time. It's where they kind of start their week out getting the news about these last several weeks and months redistricting and that whole issue. We have regular updates. I have State House reporters on. They're all great. We've been doing the Reporter Roundtable for, I want to say like maybe 9 years now, maybe longer. To tell you the truth, I haven't kept track. So I would say that's across the board popular, but people love, the cooking shows. They love the, the gardening show with Deb Knapke, who's been coming on since my first year on the job. Julie Zickafoos, likewise, is a great natural historian and naturalist and artist and author. She lives down by Marietta, and she comes on the show pretty regularly. She's a great friend of the show, and she's been coming on since, probably with the first 3 months I was on the air. She's been coming on, and people really, really love that. I didn't actually have him on the show, but I had one of his employees on the show. They were coming on Tech Tuesday, and they came on and they did their, I interviewed him for whatever it was a development. He was a developer, a software developer, and I interviewed her, and she said, my boss is out in the hall. He'd really like to meet you. And I said, well, yeah, I can't go out there right now. I've got another segment coming up, blah, blah, blah. And she says, well, he'll wait. So I'm like, okay. And I get out there, and it's this like 20 something guy in skinny jeans and a hoodie. The whole thing is made of a mint doing software development. He's quite well off, and and he was just super excited to meet me. I mean, it was obvious. It's always weird. And I said, so what do you like about the show? And I'm trying to figure it out because it's not our typical demographic. Oh. And he said, yeah, our typical demographic skews older and more established and blah, blah, blah. And he said, he goes, I love your gardening shows. So, you can't assume anything. And I will say, I can't absolutely confirm it, but I have a really good feeling about my young male audience is growing and very hardy, particularly for public radio. And I feel like that for women, young women as well. But that younger male, the 25 to 35, it's a tough demographic to get when you're competing against sports and podcasts and everything else. So I feel pretty comfortable. We've got a good listenership in that category, and which is important and good.
If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it, and feel free to post any questions so we can be inspired by new content. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.